And the story that came to me was the starfish story. The little girl, I always call it a girl, it could be a little boy, the child, standing on the beach after a storm, and all the starfish had washed up onto the beach, and they knew that those starfish were gonna die if they didn't get back in the water. And so they were throwing a starfish back out into the water, and a crusty old sailor comes up and says, "Little girl, what are you doing?" "Well, I'm saving starfish." And he looks up and down the road or the beach, and he says, "Well, there are thousands of them out here. You can't possibly help them all." And she picks up one more and throws it as hard as she can and says, "Made a difference to that one." And the thought occurred to me, this was about, I don't know, 6 years before I was able to retire, but that maybe I could do more. What if I could do more by making a difference one life at a time? What if I could do more by using my skills and talents and knowledge and experience to help people, more people, live healthier, happier, more hope-filled lives?
Hello, my friends. I'm Gary Scott. I'm the host of the What If You Could podcast. And today I've got a wonderful guest. I have Lois Hall. Hello, Lois.
Hello, my friend.
Lois is not just a guest, she's family. Uh, we'll get into more of it, but basically, I stumbled across Lois and I'm grateful I did because she's helping make life changes for me. But before we get into me, because it's all about me, it's never about me. Because we're the What If You Could podcast, you know, everybody, I always start my podcast with the question. So, Lois Hall, what is your What If You Could?
Excellent, good. What if I could? So you asked me a bit ago, what was my what if I could moment? And I think the answer to that question would be, what if I could do more to help more people? Okay. What if I could do more to help more people? I grew up from about the sixth grade on wanting to be a doctor, to go to medical school, to be a doctor, to come right back to the little rural community where I had grown up and to help people. I just wanted to help people. And that was my thinking of what that would be like. I did not get into medical school, and so that was pretty devastating. Had to kind of come back and say, well, gee, what am I going to do now? Got a call from the placement office at my university. They suggested that I interview for a job at the Ohio Department of Health as a communicable disease investigator. I didn't even know what public health was or communicable disease. I didn't have a clue, but I interviewed for the job and I got it. And I have loved my career in public health. I have loved it. And what I've actually realized is that I could probably help more people, right? That was my motive, my goal. I wanted to help people. I could probably help more people by working in public health than being a doctor, right? In that little community, I would see maybe, I don't know what, a couple hundred patients. But in public health, I can help the public. I can help entire communities, perhaps, maybe even more. But as I went through my life at the Ohio Department of Health, I retired there after 30 years. So I was there a long time. But I began to be kind of a disgruntled employee. And that's not who I am. That's not who I am, being disgruntled. And so the thought occurred to me, well, why is that? And I realized that while I felt good about what I was doing, I was making a difference, I was helping a lot of people, I could help more, right? There are rules and strings and red tape and all that kind of stuff in government work. We don't need to go into that. But the thought occurred to me, what if I could help more people somehow with the ideas that I had and the gifts that I had rather than working in that red tape bureaucratic box? And the story that came to me was the starfish story. The little girl, I always call it a
Mm.
girl, it could be a little boy, the child, standing on the beach after a storm, and all the starfish had washed up onto the beach, and they knew that those starfish were gonna die if they didn't get back in the water. And so they were throwing a starfish back out into the water, and a crusty old sailor comes up and says, "Little girl, what are you doing?" "Well, I'm saving starfish." And he looks up and down the road or the beach, and he says, "Well, there are thousands of them out here. You can't possibly help them all." And she picks up one more and throws it as hard as she can and says, "Made a difference to that one." And the thought occurred to me, this was about, oh, I don't know, 6 years before I was able to retire, but that maybe I could do more. What if I could do more by making a difference one life at a time? What if I could do more by using my skills and talents and knowledge and experience to help people, more people, live healthier, happier, more hope-filled lives. So I created an LLC. I still had my day job, but I created an LLC. I began to do more with this grief recovery method of which you speak, you know, and that has become my life's mission now. Is so and maybe I'm not done. I hope. I don't think I'm done, but achieving my what if I could. I believe, I know, I have helped a lot of people personally, as clients in the grief recovery method, but I've also been a trainer, training others, and so teaching other people how to throw starfish. I've given a lot of talks, locally, statewide, some nationally, some virtually, like this, to heaven knows how many people. So my what if you could question and moment was, what if I could help more people? Right? Even more people than being a doctor or working in a traditional public health government box. What if I could help more people? And so yeah, I guess that's my what if I could story.
Well, I just interviewed a young fella, 82 years old,
Mhm.
David McNally, and his fourth book that he just put out is called If You're Still Alive. And a lot of people don't know if they are actually nowadays. So he says it's called If You're Still Alive, Your Mission is Not Complete. So your mission is not
Absolutely.
complete, my dear. So I have a
Absolutely.
question though. So
Yeah.
what does helping more people look like to you?
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Well, so my career at the health department, I was an epidemiologist. I was the numbers person, right? Statistics. I'm not real good with statistics, but I was one of the numbers people. And what we know from working in the grief field is that 100% of us are grievers. Grief isn't just about death. Grief is about change and loss and unmet hopes and dreams and expectations. And so 100% of us, that's everybody, right? So helping more people, the population is limitless, right? The population is limitless. The beach is full of starfish. It's like they've all washed up. Now, I can't help them all, but I can keep helping as many as possible. And I love what you said about if you're alive, your mission is not accomplished. I thank God every morning for giving me another bonus day. This is another day to reach more people, teach more people, help more people. And so for me that's it. And it could be through talks, it could be through going through the grief recovery program. I honestly believe it can just be by smiling at somebody, or it could be by asking somebody, "How's your day?" Or, "What's been the best part of your day? What's the toughest part of your day? What time did you get off your shift tonight?" Or thanking them, right? I went to a doctor's appointment this morning and thanking the technician who did the test, "How'd you get interested in this job? What brought you here?" Just having conversation, just interacting, right? And so for me, helping people comes in all kinds of ways. Helping more people, helping anybody, just in any way I can. I'm not rich in money, but I can always smile. I can always ask a question. I can always give a hug. I met somebody yesterday and they told me their story. I said, "Do you accept hugs?" And she did. She was on a plane on 911. I gave a talk yesterday and I mentioned, "Where were you on 911? What did we lose on 911?" She came up to me afterwards and she said, "I was on one of the planes." Not one of the planes that crashed, but one of the planes that got grounded in Canada. You know the story, right? She wasn't at the place in Canada where they made the musical and the play or whatever, but she was on. I get chills, right? Even thinking about it and telling you about it now. I simply mentioned that as an example in a talk, and she came up later and she said, "You gave me another opportunity to remember what that day was like for me and what I lost." And she started to tell me the story and how scary it was. And when she got back home, nothing seemed normal or real. It was surreal
Mm.
after that. And I mean, many of us remember nothing was the same after 911. And as she stood there, I could hear her heart sharing this story. And so I just asked her, I said, "Do you accept hugs?" "Yeah, I do." I wonder when the last time somebody hugged her for simply sharing her 911 story was.
Yeah.
Simple little thing.
The true weird I don't know if the word is dichotomy. I don't know words. I'm not a wordsmith. But one of the interesting things I remember most is 9/12 was one of the most tragic days in the world in
Yeah.
America.
Yeah.
But 9/12 was also one of the greatest days in America because you remember how everyone rallied around each other for the first
Absolutely.
time and probably the last time. It didn't last very long because we're
Yeah.
all so insane. But we were so united, maybe
Yeah.
for that first couple of days even,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
saw people with flags, you saw
Yep.
people with pins, you saw people hugging each other, you saw people helping each other, you saw
Yep.
people sharing things that they had that other people didn't have. It was such a community
Yeah.
then,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like you mentioned, I know I didn't touch on your bio, but you've done quite a bit, besides the Ohio Department of Health. You worked a lot with the HIV and AIDS, cancer,
Yep.
other
Yep.
diseases.
Yep.
Um, Talk about grief. I mean, grief,
Yeah.
AIDS, AIDS was such a bizarre thing because it was such an unfair disease, right? It had such a
Yeah. Yeah.
stigma. It's like, oh, well, you're gay, so you've got
Yeah.
AIDS. It's like,
Yeah.
well, no, wait a minute. So grief during that period, were you involved with grief then, or you didn't get involved into
That's
that job?
actually yeah, that's actually where the grief piece of my story kind of took a turning point, let's say that. I had done other work in public health that touched my grief nerve, if you will, but I was young-ish still in 1981 when AIDS was first recognized. I was probably about 22, 23, something like that. And in those early days, it was young gay men who were getting AIDS, and they were my age, right? I didn't know the people that I was doing the statistics and the case reporting on, but they were my age. And so as I saw that information come across my desk, or I talked with their physicians or whoever, they sounded a lot like me. And the stories that I heard, it was very scary. If for those of your listeners who weren't alive yet or weren't around, it was so scary because in the early days, we didn't know what caused it, right? And it took a while even for it to come out that it was really kind of a gay-related thing, and it was about sexual transmission and so forth. But it was scary because it seemed to be infectious, and most infectious diseases, you give them a drug and they go home and they're fine. That didn't happen here. And AIDS was a horrible way to die back in the day. I don't know, Gary, if you've known people with AIDS, but back in the day, they got this Kaposi sarcoma, this kind of skin lesion, skin cancer, or they got pneumonia, or they had infectious diseases that caused diarrhea and wasting syndrome, or they would get infections that caused them to go blind. It was awful. It was awful. It was like a plague, right? And it was scary, and everybody was, being kind of like the beginning of COVID. There were a lot of similarities. We didn't know what it was, they were things were changing, and so it was in hearing those stories that I really got touched and impressed by the grief that people had, not just the young man and their partners in the gay community, but their families, certainly, their parents. I used to call it the awful secret, right? If you would ask somebody, "Hey, how's your son?" "Well, he's fine. How's yours?" Right? And they wouldn't tell you, "Well, he's come home from Florida and he's got AIDS and he told us he's gay," because they didn't want to be discriminated against either. And so the grief of the families, and then I was also struck by the grief that the professionals had. Again, the nurses, the doctors, the social workers, the therapists, right? Because again, they were used to healing people and making them well and sending them home, and that wasn't happening. And as the numbers began to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, it was just overwhelming. And so the grief was overwhelming. And while we were doing all we could, to identify what it was and how it started and how it transmitted and how it happened and all of those things, nobody was addressing the grief that was piling up. So I asked a friend of mine whose son had died by suicide, how do people deal with this grief, especially among young people and their families and their professionals? And she's the one who said, "Well, there's this guy named John James, and he wrote this book, and he happens to be coming to Columbus to do a talk at a conference, literally in the next block from my office. And so I snuck over. I didn't pay to go to the conference, there's a confession, but I snuck over on my lunch hour and heard him do the keynote speech, and I was hooked. He was
Uh,
talking about this grief stuff, and so I had, CDC grant money to do AIDS epidemiology, AIDS surveillance, AIDS education, and so I used some of that grant money to bring John back to Ohio to talk to physicians and nurses and pastors and social workers about grief, to just begin to educate them and validate that, yeah, what you're feeling is grief. What you're feeling is grief. We didn't even use that word back then. That was one of John's missions. Was we got to make people understand this is grief. It's grief. It's grief. It's not PTSD or depression or or whatever. It's grief. And so, finally he said, "You need to get trained to do this stuff." So I did. And the rest has become my history, my passion, and thank you, my future. Right? Any day I'm alive, I get to still spread that message. There's not a day in my life that I don't talk to somebody in some manner about grief, even a lunch conversation. Well, in the grief program, we da 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 da, right?
I was I was waiting tables at a restaurant in Palm Springs, California. And Palm Springs, California has a real sizable gay community. Now it's massive, might even be bigger than San Francisco, California. And so the culture was always, we have great culture here. It's a very
Yep,
inclusive culture in Palm Springs. Mm, But I remember even back in 1981, guys getting sick,
yep,
because most of the people who worked in the restaurant were gay, the waiters were gay. A lot of the patrons and the
yeah,
community around there, Cathedral City and Palm Springs. And it was incredible, the fear
yep,
of my friends. I'm
yep,
like, dude, we don't even know anything about this. And they go, but you have no idea what's happening in our community.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
We're getting decimated. It's like spreading like
yeah,
wildfire.
yeah,
And this was 1981, 82,
yep.
so um it was tragic. But uh, on the grief issue, I just want to kind of explain that, kind of how we got together. Now,
Yeah.
um John W. James and his partner, I should
Russell
know.
Friedman, Russell
Russell
Friedman.
Free.
Yep,
How could I not know? I only read the book 7 times. Um, Started what was become what the Grief Recovery Institute,
yep,
right? And then they
yep,
they put together the Grief Recovery Method Handbook.
yep,
Um, and then because people started banging on them about how much good their work was doing, they expanded this
yep, and
and then brought in people like yourselves to help train
yep.
others to do this. And that's kind of where we connected. And everyone who's ever listened, if anyone's listened to the podcast, they know my story about losing April, and my 11 years, which I call my lost decade,
Mhm.
um, from 2014, from December 8th at 8 o'clock in the morning on 2014 when we lost April, um, all the way through to right now is grief and pain. And so I stumbled across the grief recovery method somehow. And I said, wow, I need to get certified in this. I want to start helping people.
You read the
And
book. You read the book, though, right? Before you went on this
yeah,
adventure to be
yeah,
trained.
that's
Right.
where I stumbled
Exactly.
across this. I came
Exactly.
across the book and I read the book and I said, I need to get involved with this program. Well, because uh, I can be a little thick. I don't want to be mean to myself or be negative, but I could be a little bit thick. Things don't always register right away. After taking the certification, uh, yeah, was going through cancer at the time, and then I had other health issues come along, so it didn't stick real well. Chemotherapy and radiation are not good for the memory. You are deep involved, or we're deep involved with the Grief Recovery Method, the Grief Recovery Institute, and the Grief Recovery Method. So I just had an immediate hook with you. I had immediate attraction with you. It reminded me of when I first got one of my first horses, and it just hooked right on. So I came to you and I said, Lois, would you do me a huge favor? Would you do me the honor of coaching me, helping me make sure that I don't mess this up? And that's how we got together, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And again, this isn't meant to be a commercial or a plug, but I just wanna say for anybody who's
Sure it
listening,
is.
well, it's gonna be a commercial and a plug for you. Gary is amazing with this stuff. And so I know you listen to him on this podcast, you've gotten to know him in that way, but he is also trained and certified and able to provide this grief recovery method. He can take your hand and lead you through the program, and he's just got a heart of gold, and he's been there,
Thank
he's
you, but it
walked the
wasn't
walk.
supposed to be a commercial about
I
me. It
know,
was supposed to be a
I know.
commercial about the grief recovery.
Well, it is, and here's how I'll circle that back. What if I could help even more people, right? What if I could help even more people? It's by helping you reach more people. You are one of my ripples in the pond, my friend. And so that's why, people ask me to do a presentation or do a talk or do a podcast always, always and anytime. I can't reach. Remember, I told you 100% of us are grievers. I will never be able to reach or meet all of them. I can't throw far enough, fast enough all of those starfish. But if I can help you get started and become successful, or if I can do a talk and inspire somebody else to get trained and get certified, that's just another. I'm selfish, Gary. I love you dearly, but I'm helping you because I want to help more people. Right. And if I can get you on your way and doing that, then you're helping me fulfill my
There's
what
no
if I
if,
could.
my dear. There's no when you get me,
Win,
because
win,
you have
win, win,
been an
win.
amazing coach for
Absolutely.
me. But I
Absolutely.
just
Thank you.
want to expand on what you're saying, because a lot of people believe that grief is when someone died,
Mhm.
grandma died, or April died, or someone died, you go into grief. However, I don't remember the exact statistics, and they might be a little bit dated now, but I think 8 million people die a year in America. 14 million pets die. Everyone gets divorced. I think the divorce rate is 97%.
It's a lot.
Um,
Yep.
Children go through the grief. So the beauty about the Grief Recovery Institute and about what you're doing and about what I will be doing is it isn't just about, there's a grief. I mean, how many people have lost a pet and
Absolutely.
literally have gone down such painful grief, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
it's not just even losing a human. There's
Nope.
divorce, there's losing a
Yep.
job, there's,
Yep. Yep.
discovering
Well,
you've got
and
cancer. There's
and
so many losses.
many of those other losses are minimized. Well, Gary, it was just a dog. It was just a or, "Well, Gary, divorce. Yeah, you know what? That girl wasn't good enough for you anyway, and besides that, there are more fish in the sea. Just get another one. Looking for love in all the wrong places." Jobs. "Well, you were so much better than that job," or "That boss was a rat nasty old son of a gun, and, you can find another job. Get a better job," right? And so a lot of those other losses are really minimized if you're even brave enough to tell somebody that it happened, and so when people start to minimize it like that with that justa or get another one, then we quit talking about it. And it just gets stuck down here in our heart because nobody wants to know. My grief isn't as bad as their grief was or their loss. And so that's a part of what we're trying to do too is to expand this definition beyond death and to normalize it and validate it and say, yeah, it was grief. One of my favorite things that the program talks about is is unmet hopes and dreams and expectations. Hopes and dreams and expectations. I started out my story telling you I wanted to go to medical school. I hoped, dreamed, expected. I had it planned. 6th grade on, I was going to go be a doctor and come back home. When I applied for medical school to all 7 colleges in Ohio and didn't get into one of them twice, 2 years in a row, I was devastated. What am I gonna do now? And embarrassing. I had told everybody that's what I was gonna do, right? So one of my biggest griefs at that time was the unmet hope, dream, expectation of becoming a doctor. Okay. And blessedly, I found this career in public health, which I have loved probably way more than if I had been a doctor in a little town back home. No offense if anybody's listening from, Vaughnsville, Ohio. But, but, but these unmet hopes and dreams and expectations, and those we don't even identify for ourselves. We just know we feel icky, but we can't really describe why. And then in this program, when we start talking about hopes and dreams and expectations, they're like, oh, yeah, one of the processes we use is to have people look at all the losses in their life after we've done this explanation, and they realize, well, I'm okay with the people who have died. I was really pretty okay with most of them. But damn, when I didn't get that job, or when I lost the job, or when I got that health diagnosis, right? I didn't die. You didn't die from cancer, but my God, you went through hell with that, didn't you? I just know that about you. And so these unmet hopes and dreams and expectations. And today, this day and age, you're a realtor. We talked a little bit before we went live about how the real estate business has changed. I literally talked with somebody else this morning about how much houses cost and how it's almost impossible for young people now to buy a house, right? And yet we've all grown up with this hope and dream and expectation, the American dream, right? The American dream, a nice little house with a picket fence and a dog and 2.5 kids and a marriage that lasts forever and a good job and a car in the garage, maybe two, right? Well, those hopes and dreams and expectations, they're not happening the way they used to. And I have a real hard place in my heart for young people today, those 20s and 30s, right? Who are trying to reach that dream and they can't. Well, just get another job. Well, change your mind. Well, just rent something for a couple years more, right? Or live with your parents. Oh my, whoever hopes and dreams and expects to be living with your parents when you're 33, right? So I honestly think that the grief of these unmet hopes and dreams and expectations is probably the heavier weight in our heart than a lot of the deaths that we've experienced. Grandma was old. I knew she was going to die, right? Mom and dad were getting older. I knew they were probably someday going to die. Once in a while, a child will die, and that's horrible because they are young and we didn't expect that. But we've all got hopes and dreams and expectations. I don't know can I ask you a question on your podcast? What hope or dream or expectation, besides living out your life with April, what professional hope or dream or expectation, or what other maybe being a star athlete, what hope or dream or expectation has been tragic for you?
Well, the loss of April, pretty
Yeah.
much. And no offense against my current wife, Elisa, she's
Yep, yep, yep.
amazing. You know, when you get together when you're 18 and 21 years old, she
Absolutely.
was a child. I mean, it's hard to imagine that we met when she was 18, I was 21, and when we got married, I was 24,
Yeah.
and she was 20, just turning 21. So it's that was my life. That was our
Yeah.
life. There wasn't a single dream. I didn't
Yeah.
have a single dream. The dream was us. The dream
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
what were we going to build together?
Yeah.
Fortunately, and I tell these to my kids, and I tell this to a lot of people, when I meet someone and they have a job, a real job, a job, which I don't have a real job, and they're like, yeah, I'm not going to take my paid vacation, and we're too busy at work and stuff like this. I'm like, dude, think about this for a minute. Someone is going to pay you to go away and let you go goof off for a couple of weeks and calm down, get some rest, decompress, and you're not going to take it. I had a buddy of mine who literally had years and years, and he goes, "Well, I'll just cash it out, when I
Yeah. Yeah.
retire."
Yeah.
Well, his company went bankrupt and folded. So all that occurred, never got it. So
Lost.
I'm thinking in real estate, no one pays me at all. I mean, I have to actually close a transaction to get paid. So every dime I spend, everything I spend. So if someone's going to pay you to go away, go away. So one thing I don't regret is April and I were always like, let's go. Let's grab the
Yeah. Yeah.
kids. Let's take them to Italy. Let's take them to Hawaii. Let's take them somewhere.
Good for you. Good for you.
Don't wait to do
Don't
it.
wait. Don't wait.
Because she
Absolutely.
died at 46, right? So had we waited and said, "Oh, we'll do it when we retire," and then she dies at 46.
Exactly. Well,
But
and
I want to
that's
get, I
that's
want to.
yeah, but
I'm
that's
sorry,
a
I
part
just
of
want
those
to.
unmet hopes and dreams and expectations, right? Because you expected, a lot of us do, we expect to have retirement. And whether the business closes or folds, or whether the person that we were going to go with dies, and again, we don't articulate or verbalize those. We don't even really call them hopes and dreams and expectations, but yet they're in us. We just kind of assume that these things are gonna happen, and that's where a lot of the regret comes from people who, at a certain point when they realize, "I've missed a lot in my life, and it was my choice." Right?
That's what's so crazy about it. But I hope I get these in the right order. I hope I get these. God, I should know this better, but I just feel now that I'm on the spot. And that's what's part of the grief recovery method is we talk about better, different, and more.
Right.
Right? And I wish things were had been better. I wish I would have done something different. I would have wish I would
Yeah,
have had more of that. And it's that grief of just those things. There's always something that one of us can come back and say, I just
absolutely.
wish something was better, something was
Yep,
different, or something was
yep.
more. And you know you can't go back and fix that.
You can't get it back. You mentioned people who work and the guy who had it all saved up and he was gonna cash it out at the end. I mean, I took time off. I had kids who were in soccer and baseball and piano lessons and, I went to concerts and games and I did those things. We never took a lot of vacations. We took some, but I was a worker. Work was one of the things I did to distract myself from other things that were happening. And so when I retired after 30 years with the state, I had 1 year of unused leave time between I've been lucky, I was healthy, so I had unused sick leave, I had unused vacation. We had a thing called comp time so that if you worked extra hours, you could claim it as comp time. I had 1 whole year of unused leave time. Right? And I cashed in, you could only cash in half of it, but the other half I left on the table, right? And I think back too, I mean, what if I could have, right, taken more time to be with my kids? What if I had not, I think there may have been 1 year I was a room mother in somebody's class, like in elementary school where the moms bake cupcakes and go to the parties on Valentine's Day and whatnot. What if I had been there more? What did I miss by having them in daycare instead of spending time with them? What did I miss? And you can't get that back, just like you said. I've read and heard it said that no pastor sits by the bedside of a dying person and the person goes, "Well, I wish I had spent more time at work." They never say that. It's always, "I wish I had spent more time with my family." And then here's another twist that at this age has come upon me is, I have 3 grown children and they have busy lives just like I did when I was in my 30s and 40s, right? And I've seen a meme or something on Facebook that says, if your parents are 70 years old and average says that they may live another 6 years and you only typically see them twice a year at Christmas and in the summer, do you know that that means you might only physically see your parents 12 more times in their life? That breaks my heart too, right? But I can't say to my kids, I may only have 12 more times to see you, so you better haul your little butts out here to visit,
Mhm.
you
No, but
know?
what you can't no, but what you can do is what I do. I sing to my boys, "Cats in the cradle and the
Me
silver
too.
spoon, little
Me
boy
too.
blue and the man on the moon," and say,
When
"Hey,
you
man,
coming home? When you coming home,
when you
son? I
coming
don't
home,
know
Dad? I don't
when.
know when. We'll get together
Yeah,
then."
yeah.
And I I they go, "Shut up."
I know.
Okay,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
but the other thing is because you brought up you mentioned about the, man, the preacher by the bed. And
yeah,
that reminds me of people who look at the 5 stages of grief and think that the 5 stages of grief have to do with someone else's death. And was it
yep, yep.
Kubler-Ross? Is it
Ku
Dr. Kubler?
K with a K. K with a Kubler, or Kubler with a K. Yeah,
Kubler-Ross.
Kubler-Ross.
And she
Yeah.
wrote the 5 stages of grief, and basically she kind of I don't wanna put words in her mouth, but basically she regretted the fact that people kinda hijacked that towards what people are supposed to go through when
Yeah.
someone else passes or they lose a but
Actually,
but
her
that's not the
it's
case.
not, it's not. Her work was on what she was talking about was the stages of dying.
Yes.
Not for the
Yeah.
griever at all, but for the person who is given the diagnosis, right? When you're given the diagnosis of a fatal illness, denial. "Oh, no, that can't possibly be." Right? Somebody who has lung cancer. "I've never been a smoker. That can't possibly be the way. How could that happen?" Or, "I've got cirrhosis of the liver. Well, I've never had a drink in my life. How could that be? I just or it's not me. I'm too young." right? We deny that that's going to happen. And so then there comes anger, and then there comes bargaining, and then there comes DABDA. I don't know. I don't even remember what they are. But her work was on the stages people go through when they are dying. It wasn't about grief at all. And so it's been misunderstood and mistaken. And unfortunately, professional programs still teach that wrong stuff to social workers and counselors and therapists and pastors and doctors, right? And so that myth of the five stages keeps getting perpetuated when in fact that's not what she was talking about at all. And so yes, a lot of people come to the grief work with us and think, well, I'm not denying this. I'm not angry. Mom was 82. She lived a good life. We knew it was coming. I haven't gone through denial. I haven't gone through anger. What's wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with you. And so, yes, so your point is really well taken. There is so much misinformation out there about what grief is and how it happens and how we go through it and what causes it. And so really in the grief recovery method, it's an 8-week group program or a 7-session one-on-one. The first 2 or 3 weeks, we talk about all the wrong stuff that we've learned because you have to unlearn the wrong stuff before we can teach you the new stuff. And it's just pervasive. It's just pervasive still,
Well, I
the
think,
the
when you read the
misinformation.
book, yeah, you don't have to take the course to to
Right.
to read the book. You could read the book and kind of walk yourself through it. But I think people should reach out to somebody to work
Yeah.
through their grief. And I think the things once you read through it, you just see so many commonalities. When
Yeah.
you're a
Yeah.
child and your dog dies and you say, well, we'll
Yep.
just
Yep.
get another dog, right? So
Yep.
you're
Yep.
replacing the grief, but
Yep.
you never feel the same towards the other dog, and it's like
Exactly.
that
Exactly.
wasn't your initial dog. There's so many things that the
Yeah.
grief recovery method touches on that bring up so
Absolutely.
many things that we can flush up.
And I think one of the best things about the Grief Recovery Handbook is this John James who wrote it, he was just a guy. He was just a guy. He grew up with an alcoholic father who hit him a little. He never says he beat me. He hit him a little. He was a Vietnam War veteran from with a Marine. Think of the grief that he experienced there. He had a brother who died suddenly at a young age, unexpectedly. He and his wife had a little girl, but they were expecting a second baby. He was going to be a better dad to that little boy than his dad had been to him. And then the baby was born and died 3 days later. And then, like many times happens, a couple who loses a child, they got divorced. There's another loss. And so the book is written from the heart of a grieving dad, not from some academic, professional psychology person. In fact, those of you who are watching, on the shelf behind Gary over his shoulder is a purple book. It's, yes, right there. It's called the Grief Recovery Handbook. And go get it, read it. Absolutely. You can get it on Nook and Kindle. You can listen to it on, on an Audible format.
Or
But
contact Lois and she'll send you one, or contact Gary and he'll send
or
you.
contact Gary. Exactly. You already know Gary. You know Gary. You love him. You trust him. But people will read that book and they'll come back after the first session and they'll go, "Oh, how did he know what I was feeling? How did he know what I was thinking? That book, it just spoke to me." So you're absolutely right. People will read through and it's written at a very simple reading level.
Fair.
It's not an academic text. And so people just go, "Oh my God, he's like inside my heart. How did he do that?" Well, it's because he wrote it from his experience as a grieving person. And I love the fact that it was written by a man. Because most of the people who will reach out to us, well, yeah, John really originated it. So I always refer to him. But yeah, Russell was a man too. But most of the people who will come to us or seek us out, Gary, are usually women. Right.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that this book was written by a man. It came from a man's heart, a veteran, a Marine, for God's sake. Hoorah. Right. It was written from the heart of a man. He was also in AA. John James was a lifelong AA participant. And so there are some similarities in the grief recovery method with what he learned in AA. And so it's very helpful for those who are dealing with addictions too, whether it's food or drugs or alcohol or tobacco or whatever it is. And again, that touches my public health heart too, you know, but the book is amazing. It's amazing. And when people read it, he wrote the book somewhere in the 19 early 80s after his baby died. And it hasn't really been updated. They've added stuff on at the end, but the method is still the method. His story is still his story. And so, it's kind of timeless. It's really kind of a timeless, ageless process.
And the what you were you were checking off things that had happened in John's life. You're
Mhm.
saying, this happened when he was younger, and this happened, and then this happened, and that's part of what he set up in the grief recovery method is
Right.
basically we
Right.
take these things, we go from your earliest memory to this moment. Let's chart the events that struck grief for you.
Yeah.
Right, so that's one of the
Yeah.
charts that we do so we could bring them up, and a lot of times, what I've discovered with this, going through it the number of times that I did was, you know, you don't think something is a grief
Yeah.
period. When you go through this process and you chart it, you go, "You know what? That was my wedding, so I wouldn't put that down as grief, but you know what? I didn't like that stinker. I knew right when I walked down the aisle,
So
that
many
guy was not
times.
for me."
So
So,
many
yeah, it
times.
was your wedding and it was a celebration, but that was a grief moment because you realized right
Absolutely.
then, as you're saying, "I do," that it's I
Absolutely.
don't.
Well, and the definition that we use is grief is the normal and natural response to change or loss of any time, of any kind. And so when you look down that aisle and either you're the bride on daddy's arm ready to walk, or you're the gentleman at the front or the partner at the front, don't mean to be gender
Nope.
specific here, but when you turn around and you see that person, I ask people sometimes when I do talks, how many of you looked at that other person and went, damn, what am I doing? 'Cause your life is gonna change, right? I mean, there are a lot of
Wife
good
did.
things.
My second one did.
Life is gonna change. Grief is about change. What changes when you get married? Privacy, right? Privacy for one thing. Finances may change. With the things you like to eat or not
Freedom.
eat
Your
change.
freedom's gonna
Freedom,
change.
absolutely. I'll ask women, or I could even ask men too. When you found out that you were gonna have a baby, when you had a baby, that's a good thing. Isn't that wonderful? Oh, getting a baby. Oh, isn't she sweet? Isn't she cute? Isn't she what changes when you have a baby? What do you lose when you have a baby? And most of the women in the room will say sleep, right? But again, privacy, your whole schedule, your whole routine, your intimacy with your partner, right? So even good things, thank you for going down this lane, because even good things can produce some grieving moments. Right. I loved working at the Ohio Department of Health. I loved public health. I still love public health. But there were some things that were happening that I wasn't happy with, right? I wasn't making a big enough difference. I wasn't helping enough people working for the state in that little box with the red tape, right? And I was becoming a disgruntled employee. That's not who I am, right? That's not who I am. And so I really got to the point, by golly, where I was looking forward to retiring. I couldn't wait to retire. I had the days and hours literally counted out. I had it counting down on my watch. But when I got closer to retirement, I was ready. I was ready to go. But I remember driving downtown one day at 6:30 in the morning, and the sunrise over the skyline was just beautiful as I came across this overpass. And I started to get teary and thinking, I'm gonna miss the skyline at 6:30. And then I went, wait a minute, no, you can get up any day you want to and do that. But even something as simple as seeing that skyline, I had driven downtown for 30 years, right? And seeing that skyline 99% of the days was a really good thing, right? What am I going to do when you retire? Who am I going to be? Who are my friends going to be? What will I do that will make me significant, right? What will I do that will make a difference in the world once I retire? Will they remember me? And I knew from being there 30 years that a lot of times when somebody leaves after a long time, you know what happens? They park a dumpster outside their office and they throw everything in it. Right? You're nodding your head. I saw that happen when I was there, and I knew that when I left, they'd probably park a dumpster outside my office. Who am I gonna be? What am I gonna do? How will our finances change? How will my relationships change? So even good things, getting married, having a baby, retiring, getting a promotion, for anybody who's gone from being a rank and file to being a supervisor, a manager, an owner, there are changes there. It's lonely. It's lonely. I actually, when I got my first supervisor position, my boss told me, "You can't go to lunch with the secretary anymore." Why not? She's my friend. We've gone to lunch together for, I don't know how, 12 years. What do you mean? Well, it's just not appropriate. You can't be hanging out with the staff like you used to. And there was information that I was privileged to that I couldn't share with staff, right? It's so even getting a promotion is a good thing, but it changes things. Grief is about change. Change, not just death,
People
but
don't people don't realize, and all you have to do is look at the statistics of when men, it's mostly men because women have lives, men don't. Men retire and they're like, "Oh, great, I saved all this money. I'm 65. I'm gonna go out and golf all the time, hang out with my buddies." And a year later, they're so depressed. They don't have a purpose. They
mhm,
don't have a mission. They don't have a
mhm,
challenge. They don't feel significant.
mhm,
And a year
mhm,
later, they die. And
mhm.
and it's, they don't realize, people don't realize the grief involved with the loss of significance, the
Yeah,
loss of
exactly,
purpose, the loss of
exactly.
having a mission. A lot of women go through it when the kids leave the nest. The
Absolutely. Oh, and
husbands
that was
not so
one for
much.
me. That was one for me too. I mean, because I had a job, my husband had a job as I was going through happy times and he was going there, and he had bad times and so my kids, my two older boys particularly, they were my soulmates. I remember sitting on the picnic table out in the back patio talking to my kids about what had happened at work today. Because I really couldn't talk to my husband because he had his own shit that was happening at work. Right.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that empty nest thing was very real. But I wanna touch back too on what you said, what's my purpose gonna be? I love, Gary Scott, that's what your question is about. What if you could? What if you could? Now that you're retiring, now that the company has folded and you've got some free time again, now that your kids are out of the house, what if you could? What if you decided you could be an artist? You could paint? What if you decided you could sing or you could learn to play an instrument or you could take up a foreign language or you could travel? What if you could? Life doesn't end until it ends, right?
And that
And so
and
I
that's a
love
that that David McNally book, I'm gonna bring it up again, David, because it's so good. He actually sent me one to give to my mom, who's
oh,
90. And basically the book, his book, if you're not dead yet, I mean, if you're still alive, I love that title, "If You're Still Alive," because most people don't live anymore, they just exist. If
yep.
you're still alive, your mission's not over. And what he talks about is, as we age, we are the elders, and we have so much to contribute. And back in the day, the elders were the doctors. The elders were the midwives.
Mhm, mhm.
You went to the elders for advice. They lived in your
Absolutely.
home. You didn't shove them into a nursing to
Yes.
contribute. Yes, the downfall of humanity, right? But
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you do have so much to contribute, and
yeah.
so. But if you don't flush it up, if you don't go to someone at 68 and go, you know what? I've had a really poopy 3 years since I retired, and I really can't talk to my wife about it. I can't talk to my buddies about it. I need to speak to someone about this grief I'm going through with this loss of purpose. I can't seem to get it going, right? So
Mhm.
that's a big thing. And I live in a retirement community,
Yep, yep,
and I see this happen all the time. I just see widows because I can sell their houses. It
yep, yep,
happened to Bob. Well, Bob died. I'm like, dude, he was only 68 years old.
yep,
They didn't have the
yep,
purpose.
yep. Well, and another thing being a realtor is all the stuff. I was at a conference yesterday and one of the other speakers was an older gentleman who was talking about helping older people transition into next stages of life. And he mentioned that his older sister is going to have to be leaving her home. She's in an assisted living facility and they got to sell the house. But the stuff that has collected, she's never gonna go back home. She's gonna go from the assisted living into or wherever she goes next, right? So he's trying to go through the stuff in her house, and he talked about she still had something of their mother's who died 45 years ago, and he asked her, "Well, why do you still have that?" It was a makeup case or something. "Why do you still have mom's old makeup case?" "Oh, I just couldn't bear to part with it." Right? Mom ain't gonna use that anymore, and you're not either, right? But again, from a realty perspective, or this aging, selling the house, that's a good thing. It's a good, but God, the stuff that we've got, you
Well,
must deal with
thanks
that too.
to thanks to your inspiration, I have put together a booklet called The Emotional Side of Moving. And it started out as 5 pages and it ended up at 15 pages because the more I got into it, the more I realized how much the emotional side of moving can
Absolutely,
be so tough. And it's geared for everyone because, it could be your first home you're leaving that you raised the kids or whatever.
absolutely,
But for a lot of seniors, they stay a little bit too long in their home because they just can't leave. They can't
right,
get
right.
into the process. Even though the kids are like, "Mom, you're falling," or, "Dad, you're struggling, you don't cook dinner, you haven't eaten in 2 days because you won't cook yourself dinner," whatever. It's time that you come live with us or we get you in a facility or something like that. But they just can't leave
Oh, yeah.
'cause it's
There are
too
memories.
emotional.
There are memories tied to those places. And so Gary and I have talked too that John James actually in the book talks about a ritual for when you move, right? We have rituals for everything. We have weddings, we have bar mitzvahs, we have, baptisms, baby showers. And so John talks in the book about actually taking a tour through the house before you leave, before you sell it, and telling the stories. This and that's part of the idea of the whole grief recovery process is giving it voice, telling the stories. So when we sold our house where our kids had all grown up, it was the big house with the big yard and the big driveway and all that stuff. Well, when we downsized, that was really hard, but I know that ritual, right? And so our realtor allowed us to go back into the house
Mm.
before. I mean, a flipper had changed it. It didn't look like our house, but he allowed us to go back in and we walked through and told stories. And in the room where our youngest child had lived, used to be when you opened the door to like close the door and you look behind it, there were red magic marker marks all over the wall. They had written on the wall. And so when we got to that room, we told the story. Do you remember when Cade wrote on the walls? Do you remember that? Right? We had orange shag carpet. In our living room. I hated it. And it was awful. But the kids told stories. That's where we used to wrestle. When the boys were little, that's where they used to wrestle, or they'd lay on their tummies and watch TV. They loved that orange shag carpet. And they got to tell that story. Do you remember the year that the Christmas tree was so crooked that we had to literally nail it to the floor? And we laughed, right? And there was a and there was a big rock outside our house where I used to sit on the rock and watch for the kids to come home from school. And Cade wanted to know when we moved. Do you think we could move the rock with us? Could we take the rock with? No, you know, and so being able to even walk through the house and tell those stories, to validate those stories, to validate those memories, and there were tears and there was laughter and there was joy and excitement at thinking somebody else was going to get our house, right, without the orange shag carpet, without the red marks on the wall, and they were going to use that house to have their stories, you know, and it made it so much easier because we had a lot of years. We had 20 years in that house with parties and kids and changing diapers and party growing kids. I mean, we had wonderful time in that house. And it
There's
just
there's a spot in a lot of homes, and I tell people, "Take a picture of that before you paint."
absolutely.
And it's the spot on the wall where they have the kids, and they have the height of the kids and their age. So
Yes,
many
yes,
houses have
yes,
that. I'm like,
yes.
"Dude, don't paint yet.
Yeah.
Take a
Yeah.
photograph of that,"
Yeah.
because and the photograph idea is a wonderful thing. It's like the sewing
Absolutely.
kit that your mom didn't wanna get rid of. It's like, take a couple pictures of that and
Yeah.
frame it in a really
Yeah.
cool frame. Get a
Yeah.
a antique-y sort of picture
Yeah.
of that and give it to mom and have
Exactly.
her
And
hang it
tell the
in her new
stories.
place
Tell
and
the
tell the story.
stories, right?
Yeah,
Tell the stories.
yeah.
Give it voice. Don't just let it sit in here and ferment and, get all ucky. Tell the stories. Let that heart clean itself out by telling the stories. Telling the stories.
Yeah.
And
And I
you'll
think
you'll
that's
have
what
some tears, but you'll laugh too.
yeah, and that's what the grief recovery method is so wonderful about. It's
Yep.
so good at flushing up And gently, we say when someone charts their thing, you go, no, you had more than 4 events in your life. All right, go back to the
Mhm.
drawing board. And I really want you to now dig a
Yeah,
little deeper. This is a
yeah,
safe place.
yep, yep,
You're in the get smart cone of silence right now. You are in a safe
yeah,
place
yeah,
because at some point you have to let this stuff out.
that's
You
right.
have to expose it. And I
Yeah,
think one of the greatest things about the grief recovery method, and I know it happens all the time, someone comes to the grief recovery method because their husband died or their mother died, and they feel that's the grief that they're going through. And as they go
yeah,
through the process, they go, I liked mom and everything. She was cool. But what really has been messing me up since I was 8 years old is this, right? And
yeah,
this is what we need to heal. And
absolutely.
it's an
It is,
amazing
it is.
process.
It is. Well, and then too, learning what you learned from the past helps you in the future, right? I mean, I tell people, my dad was my guy, my mom not so much, right? Well, when I have done my work on my mom, I've learned a lot about me, right? And I believe, you have to ask my kids for sure, but I believe that I have been a better mom to my kids because of what I've learned, not so much about mom, but about me being that daughter, right? When you're a kid, you don't think to ask questions, or at least not the right ones, right? And it's always mom, 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 mom. Well, yeah, but there are three fingers pointing back. What did I do? Right? What did I do that made her spout off and yell at me? Or what did I say that made her slap me across the, I blame mom, but what was my piece in that story? And so I really believe too that by looking at our past, it helps us see patterns and trends that we would not have seen if we didn't put it all out on the line so that we don't repeat that in the future. Those generational things, that we didn't like about our growing up story, we don't have to repeat those. We have to learn from them, and then we get to choose to change it and make it different. And that's the other piece that I love is we get to choose. Grievers often feel like they're the victim, they're the poor pity me of the whole story. And we learn that no, 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 we get to choose. We can't change what happened, but we can always choose how we respond to it. And in that way, then making the present and the future even better, even better. So it sounds weird. I get real passionate when I talk about the grief stuff, and it's to some, it may sound kind of perverse. How can she be so excited about talking about grief and death and all? Well, it's because I know that there's hope on the other side. I know there's
Something
hope on the other side.
something so special about helping people, but you said something that I think is crucial for people to understand, and it's such a huge part of the grief recovery method, right? Dad, superstar. Mom, not so much. So my mom died and your mom died. And it's like, I know how you feel, you poor thing. Your mom died, my mom died, I know how you feel. Well, that's complete bullpucky, right?
Yeah.
I didn't get along with my mom that great, and
Right.
your mom was
Exactly.
Saint Teresa, right?
Yeah.
Your feelings towards your mom are not in any way like my feelings towards my mom.
Exactly.
So I
Exactly.
don't know how you feel. I can't say to
Exactly.
you, oh, I know how you feel because you don't know how I
You
feel.
don't.
No
Yeah.
loss is the same, right?
Yep. 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 100% of us are grievers, and none of them are the same. There's a puzzle. There's a puzzle to put
Shocker
together, isn't
alert.
it? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Even siblings who grew up in the same household, it's different, right? My brother, I only have one brother. My brother and I are pretty different people, and I'm sure if he told his story, it would be very different from my story. So even siblings in the same family, a lot of
Yeah.
times have different stories.
And that's the things that you need to expose because there's a guilt feeling of you should feel worse. Like when my dad died, I was like, yeah, bummer. He's
Yeah,
my age. I'm 63. He died at 63. So I'm like, God, I guess I should feel worse that my dad died, but we just weren't that close. I don't have any
yeah,
memories of
yeah,
my
yeah.
dad really, even though we lived together. But so there's that grief covered with guilt, covered with shame
Mhm,
of I
mhm.
should feel bad that my
Yeah,
dad
yeah,
died. And
yeah.
and so that just compounds
Oh, it's
challenges it. and
It's
you
so
have to flush
complex.
them up.
Exactly. And again, you used the word guilt, and in the grief recovery business, we don't really like the word guilt because guilt has an intention to harm attached to it. You didn't intend not to have a happy, joyous relationship with your dad. There was no intent there to harm him or harm your relationship. We prefer the word regret. That again, I wish things had been different and better or more with dad. Right? So that's another one too, because guilt, a lot of people use that word guilt and they just get stuck on it. I feel so guilty, so guilty. Guilt implies this intention to harm, and that if you're guilty, you should be punished. Right. And so whether or not we're punished by others, we punish ourselves. And so we try to get people to stop using the word guilt. It's generally not the right word. You didn't intend to have harm to anybody in that situation, but are there things that you regret, things you wish had been different, better, or more? And then it's like, that just makes it a little easier. Yeah, nobody punishes you for things you wish had been different, better, or more, right? And you don't punish yourself as much for things that you wish had been different, better, or more. So just another little tidbit here toward the
I
end of
love
our
the different,
time.
better, and more. I messed it
Oh,
up
me
earlier. I
too.
went
Me
better,
too.
different, and more, but it's different, better, and more, and it's
Yeah.
significant to make sure we get them in the right order. I had them in
Oh,
the wrong
yeah.
order.
Oh, I don't think the
But
order
I do
matters so
I
much.
do think, yeah, but I
Yeah.
do think because we do so many times we carry that, I
Mm-hmm.
wish
Mm-hmm.
things had been different. I wish I could have done more. I wish I would have been a better dad, a
Yep.
husband.
Yep.
We
Yep.
carry that, and
Yep.
that just compounds the grief.
Weighs us down. Yep. And again, people don't think about that. We don't talk about that. We don't articulate it. And so it just kind of sits there in the pit of our heart until somebody comes along and says, "Hey, read this book. Let me help you go through it. Let's talk about that. Let's look at that line. Yeah, there are probably more than 4 on there. Let me help you flush that out and make it a little more robust. Be honest with me. We talk a lot about telling the truth and being honest." So,
The other thing that really attracted me to the grief recovery method is, like you said, if it's a group, then it's 8 weeks. If it's
yep.
one-on-one coaching, it's 7 weeks.
So,
N I loved the fact that you went into this knowing we could come out of this. It's
yeah.
not like you go to the therapist for 15 years and every week you're paying him $150 to sit on the couch so he can
Yep.
say, "Well, how does that make you feel?" Right?
Right.
Nothing against therapists or
Right. Me
psychologists or
either. Me either.
psychiatrists. I'm not picking on them. They do amazing work. It's very difficult work. But that was one of the things that attracted me because I
Yeah.
remember I went to a therapist about a year after April died. And I was like, I had done a lot of I've always been interested in self-help and there obviously I mean I've got a whole bookshelf full of self-help books. So as she's talking to me, I'm visualizing her with Therapists for Dummies or Grief for Dummies or a lot, let's go to chapter 7,
Yeah.
right, and talk to Gary about that. That's how I felt. She
Yeah.
was not
Yeah.
listening to me, and I didn't think she
Yeah.
had any interest in this ever coming to a resolution. And the grief recovery method is a very specific. We're going to take you through this method, and at the end of
Yeah.
this, we believe you will find some
Yeah.
peace. And that's what really attracted me to it.
Yeah.
It wasn't an open-ended thing where I'm gonna like, "Oh my gosh, how long do I gotta
Yeah.
go through this?"
Right. So a couple things even about what you've said there is it is time limited, right? And it's not counseling and it's not therapy, and we need to be real clear with that too. I'm not a counselor or a therapist. I'm an epidemiologist. I'm a biologist. You're a real estate person. It's not counseling or therapy. It's a class. It's an educational program. We learn things, right? Because our brain keeps saying, why? Why me? Why now? Why this? Well, if we would let our brain learn some new stuff, it might help the brain process what the heart's trying to tell it. The other thing is that, in this relationship, I facilitate this program. You will facilitate or help people go through it, but I don't fix you, right? The participant does the work. They help themselves. They help themselves. I simply listen. And you've done a great job with that today, too, Gary, hearing words that I've said and then bringing that back up. Well, let's talk a little more about that. Right. And so the person really does this work themselves. And we teach them skills they can use over and over and over again when the 8 weeks or 7 weeks are done. right? And so it's not counseling or therapy, it's an educational program. They do the work themselves, they fix themselves, they help themselves, and then they've got tools to take into the future. I have heard people tell me literally many times, I've spent thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours in therapy, and nothing has helped me like this little 8-week program. Right? I've heard people say that, and I mean, I'm with you. Therapy is a great thing, counseling is a great thing, no harm, no foul. But, I tell people too, so when you go to a buffet, there are different things on the buffet, right? And this is just another item on the buffet. Why don't you try this one? Try this grief recovery, the item on the buffet. It may help you, right? And if you feel like you need something more, well, then go look at one of the other counters in the buffet and find a therapist or find a counselor or use a faith person, a clergy person, or a good friend, right? Find another item on the buffet, but there's help out there, and it can come in different forms. But I think
Like
this is
what you said is powerful because you have the book, you have the work.
yep,
And like what happens is because you have an alumni program where people
yep,
can come
yep,
back and say,
yep,
that helped me so much with that relationship, that
yep,
specific relationship. I finally have clarity on it. I finally
yep,
have relief from that, which been dogging me since I was 8. Yet I've discovered there are other relationships that I want to flesh up and heal. Right.
yeah,
And so through the alumni program or just additional work with you or
yep,
with myself or
yep,
one of the other grief recovery specialists is they can go deeper if they want to. They
yep,
can
yep,
flesh out more. They could do more work
yep,
with a facilitator or a coach
yep,
if they
yep,
choose to,
yep,
or you could do it yourself. I interviewed a wonderful young lady, and I'm not going to say her name. She's on the podcast. You could look her up, but she's Haitian. Her family's from Haiti, um, and she was molested at a very young age, and she's in her 40s now, and it's been tragic for her. It's something that is stop and she's told the story on the podcast. I'm not saying anything out of school. Um, it just literally kept her from moving forward with 40 years of her life.
absolutely.
This incident, and she's working on it now. But she's been in multitudes of different therapies, different programs, and sometimes it takes, like you said, maybe this one didn't work, maybe this one didn't work, but you're going to find something that's
Yep,
going to help you.
yep,
But you just have to flush these things up and heal them.
absolutely.
Otherwise, like I said, this poor gal, 40 years. I've talked to dozens and dozens of people who've lost a child. I
Yep,
say, well, how long ago was the loss? 30 years ago.
30 years ago. Yep,
And they're still in it, and that's no that I God, yeah, I, of
yep,
course,
yep,
wouldn't wanna lose either one of my son. I'm not saying anything negative about them, but sometimes it's shocking to me how long people can carry something, it just
yeah.
doesn't leave them, and so you have to it's very important for the rest of your life to finally heal.
Absolutely, and for your other relationships, I mean, what about subsequent children that were born or other children that the woman had, when that child died, right? I mean, how does it influence and affect your relationship with those other children or with your spouse or your partner, right? The other thing, Gary and God, we could do a whole session on this too, but there's a second program that we offer called Helping Children with Loss. Right? That young woman who was molested, probably as a child, has carried this for 40 years. In public health, we talk about treatment and prevention, right? The grief recovery method I like to think of as treatment for people who are grieving. Helping children with loss is not for children, it's for adults to help the children in their life deal with the changes and losses they're experiencing. Had this woman had somebody, a parent, a guardian, a caregiver, or somebody back when that happened, and they could talk about it then, you know, maybe she wouldn't have carried it for 40 years. And again, in a public health context, there's this thing called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, which literally came out about the same time John James published the first book, but it solidifies and clarifies that the things that happen to us in childhood If we don't deal with them adequately, then we do carry them throughout our lives. Adverse childhood experiences. You can Google it and look on the CDC website. I mean, there are articles that have been written. Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey did a book on what happened to you. It's not what's wrong with you, what happened to you, and again, from a public health perspective, I think now more than ever, we need to be doing more to help our kids deal with the change and loss they're experiencing, right? In this day and age,
We could do
we
3
could
hours on
we
that.
could do we absolutely. I'm really trying to focus a little bit more on that program now in my own private work because we can treat grief forever, but gosh, if we could get in and we can't prevent the losses they're going to have, but if we could help teach them healthier ways to deal with those losses, maybe we would mitigate some of the other secondary things that happen. Maybe they wouldn't turn to drink or drug or food. Maybe they wouldn't be bullies, or maybe they wouldn't try suicide, or
How
maybe.
about the suicide rate? The
Yes,
suicide rate is
exactly.
absolutely
Exactly.
abhorrent. I mean, it's
Exactly.
never been as
Exactly.
bad as it is now. The age
And
of it
among young
keeps
people.
increasing. It's
Among
well,
young people.
yeah. So I'm talking about is the ages that
Yeah.
children are taking
Yep.
their lives, how
Yeah.
easily they are convinced that that's the only way out by friends or social
Yep.
media and norm
Yep.
and things like that.
Yep.
And they think they think that they don't have anyone to go to.
Exactly.
And so there's only one way out to stop the pain. And anyone who's been in that dark of a spot, which I have, where you think there's no way to stop this pain, there's only one way to stop this pain, and that's the ultimate way to
Yeah.
stop the
Yeah.
pain. And you have to have something to hold on to. I use the analogy of you probably haven't been there because you're a good kid. But when I was a kid, and a lot of kids who had too much Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill, or had too much Mad Dog 2020 or some sort of booze, and they're sitting on the bed and the bed's spinning, and you think if you put your foot on the side of the bed on the floor on the ground, the bed will stop spinning. And sometimes that's how life is, that you
Yeah.
have to find a way to get this downward spiral stopped.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
talk to someone.
Yeah.
This grief work is absolutely crucial, and that's why you're so passionate about it, and
I love
that's
it.
why I love you, and that's why I begged you to be my coach
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
help me be
Well,
a better grief coach.
and and circling back, what if I could? That what if I could moment. What if I could help more people? Right? I thank God that I didn't get to become a doctor. What if I'd probably be so frustrated because I wasn't helping enough people. What if I could? What if I could help more people? And more than being a doctor, more than even working in traditional public health, what if I could help more people? Right?
Well, like you said, I'm your ripple.
A
I
ripple
mean,
in the pond.
e every person that you coach will go help thousands of people.
Absolutely.
And after
Absolutely.
you've coached 1,000 people, you've just helped 1,000,000 people.
Absolutely.
So, um, medicine now is so horrible. You would have
Yeah.
just been miserable with today's medicine.
Oh, I
I
can't imagine.
really I really long for the day, and I've talked to a lot of my doctor friends, and they feel the same way. They're all starting to give up taking insurance. And they go, "I wanna be, uh, uh, that MD doctor from television,
Yep.
me you
Marcus
know,
Welby.
Marcus Welby. I wanna show up at someone's house with my little black bag, and I
Yeah.
wanna help
You
people,
just
and
want to
I
help
don't
people.
I'll take a dozen eggs, when I leave the house. I'll have Jim tune up my car next time it needs a
Yep.
tune up, and then
Yep.
I'll take care of his
Yep.
child. Obviously, there's things that are more expensive because of
Yep.
the equipment, things like that. But I think more and more doctors would desperately love to
Oh,
go back to just being a doctor, um,
absolutely.
because they can't be. Insurance won't let them.
Oh, exactly. Well, how when you go to the doctor, how long is your visit? There
Oh,
was a
4
study that
minutes.
was yeah, there was a study that was done many
4
years
minutes.
ago now at the Cleveland Clinic, and the average time that a doctor actually spent with the patient was like 2.67 minutes or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, you can't listen to people, you can't hear people, you can't even ask the right questions in that amount of time,
No.
right?
The
And so
nurse
you
the nurse
prescribe
takes your
something.
pulse, takes your
Yep.
pulse. Trust me, because unfortunately go to a lot of doctor appointments recently, and the doctor comes in, and here's my beef. the doctor does not say, because they don't have the time to.
They
They
don't
say,
have the
"Are you
time.
vaccinated? Are you this or that?" They don't say, "How are you sleeping? How's your diet? How's
Yep,
your stress level?
yep,
Are you
yep,
exercising? Are
yep,
you drinking enough water?
yep,
What's your diet like?" You know what I mean?
yep.
Instead of looking to do long term, and I'm not picking on doctors. I love all my doctor friends. I think doctors are amazing, amazing people. But it's the insurance companies and
Yeah.
it's the medical system
There's
that
no billing
keeps
code.
them.
There's no billing code for having a conversation with Gary.
No,
There's no billing code for that, right?
no.
And a lot of times too, there may be a quota. You got to get through at least so many patients in a day, right?
Yep.
It's hard. God saved me from being a doctor. The other thing too is, when by the time I would have kind of been out there in the medical practice, I would have been the physicians who was seeing those young men come in and die. They were my age. I honestly, I'm a person of faith. I honestly believe God saved me to just count them and to get the data and the statistics and not, I mean, I knew many of the young men with AIDS. If I saw the AIDS quilt, there would be names and panels of people I knew. But I don't think I could have been a young doctor in those days when AIDS was first coming on. And so I believe it was God who gave me this message, this vision of wanting to help people, and finding my way to public health, and then finding my way to the grief recovery method. And so, I had a
I
vision a little bit ago, Gary, that I have never had before, but it's in talking with you. And so, you talked about ripples in the pond, and the more people we train, the more people we help. I have a vision. What if there were no more starfish on the beach and we could just sit there with our toes in the sand? Wouldn't that be a wonderful vision? If there were no
Yeah.
more people who needed the grief recovery method, what if we could just sit on the beach with our toes in the sand? All the starfish were being taken care of. Vision.
Imagine
What
John
if we
Lennon.
could? What if we
Right? It's
could?
a what if we could, and John Lennon's song Imagine, I mean,
Mhm.
but yeah, what if we could? But see now you're the grief doctor. You're the
People
grief
tell me
doc.
I'm a heart doctor. People tell me I'm a heart doctor.
There
So,
you go. You're a heart
yeah,
doctor. Right?
yeah.
But I'll tell you, you mentioned COVID and AIDS in the same thing.
Mhm.
COVID was a bad flu. I know people that died from COVID, but had other issues regardless. Don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but AIDS was, and the tragedy of AIDS is COVID, you had a majority of people, you had half the country completely paranoid, wearing paper bags over their head and doing crazy things and, all this stuff. And the other half going, it's a flu, whatever. I'm not even going to wear a mask.
Yeah,
But with AIDS, the stigma came. It was so, because I had a
yeah,
lot of really good gay friends. I still do. We have such a big gay community here. And to watch them just die,
yeah.
or God forbid they showed up with a owie on
Those
their face,
Kaposi's leaves.
and
Yeah.
the paranoia of it, you know.
Mhm.
Um it was so tragic. So from there, now you are doing this beautiful work with grief. Lois, this has been great. I don't know how we just blew through an hour and a half like it was nothing, but that's just what we
I
do.
know.
Um, so, guys, again, you've been blessed with a little bit of time of the grief doctor, Lois Hall. Lois was a deep facilitator and trainer with the Grief Recovery Institute, which teaches the grief recovery method. She has now started coaching along with her own training in the grief recovery method, and you do all the levels of the grief, right? You do the children, you do the pets, you do the whole thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
What are the four that we offer?
So there's the grief recovery method, groups or one-on-ones, helping children with loss, and it's only 4 sessions, so it doesn't go as deep emotionally, but it helps adults learn how to help the children in their care. So parents, teachers, counselors, educators, etc. And then there is a specific pet loss program because they realized that a lot of people said, well, I couldn't come to a grief class and sit next to somebody who'd lost a child. I couldn't come to a grief class and sit next to somebody who'd lost a long-term spouse. So they didn't come. And so they created a pet loss specific program so they feel safe and comfortable among other people who have lost pets. And so the grief recovery method, helping children with loss, the pet loss program, and then as you mentioned, the alumni program to come back and do it again. And that's usually a shorter process because you don't need to go through all the beginning sessions and the general education sessions. You can just dive right into another relationship and as many relationships as you want to use. So those are kind of the four mainstays of our work. So yeah, it's an
Well,
amazing program.
I lied earlier because I'm a realtor and we lie. Not as bad as attorneys, but we're pretty bad. Um, I said I had the one question, which is the what if you could question. And I told you that one to give you a heads up
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you'd be ready.
yeah.
But I lied. I actually have two questions. The last question I don't give you ahead of time because I kind of want it to be a little spontaneous and from the heart. So, Lois Hall, before we sign off, before we say goodbye here, and you can get on with your day in beautiful Ohio, is there a last message or a last thought or a last quote,
Mm,
something that really means something to Lois Hall that you would like to leave us with before we
yeah,
sign off?
yeah. Yeah, and it's good. I'm glad that was spontaneous. I mentioned earlier, I am a person of faith. I believe we were created to be like this, excited and standing up tall and straight and happy and productive and loving. I believe we were made to be like that, yet grief causes us to be like this, right? And so the purpose, when you take the grief recovery training, the purpose of this program is to rediscover the ability to transform the quality of your life so that you will be able to deal with the pain in your life and so that number 2, you can help others. I love that purpose, to rediscover the ability to transform the quality of your life. So to rediscover means we used to know this. Think of a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old. Right? Right? To rediscover the ability. That means it's something you can learn to transform the quality of your life. That's not just making changes. That's going from a pupa to a butterfly, right? And I think that transformation is transforming us from this back to this. So that would be my last message, that the purpose of this whole work that Gary and I do is to transform the quality of our lives so that we will be able to help transform the quality of others' lives. Because it's in us. That's how we were made. It's how we were made. It's how we can be transformed to be again if we rediscover that ability to make that transformation. How's that? Did that work for
Not
you?
bad. Not
Okay.
bad. Not bad. No, that was glorious. That
Yeah.
was beautiful and so true. So true. It's I I started this thing. I don't know if I told you this headway thing that I'm doing where they send me a book. I read a book every morning, right? But
Wow. Yeah.
it's like a 15-page synopsis of the book, like
Wow. Wow.
cheat sheet or whatever. And so I've been on it. I think I'm on 32 days in a row or something. I won't miss a day because I'm obsessed with it. And I saw something that kind of stuck out to like, what you said, about just how the grief can really steal so much from
Mm.
us. But there's also so much out there that is stealing from us. The social media, the outrage of the week. There seems to be a new outrage every week. We have to light our hair on fire
Yep.
and run
Yep.
around and do stupid stuff. We're stealing so much from ourselves. And I think what I love so much about the grief recovery method is it walks us through a process to heal ourselves
Yeah.
so we can move forward to the life we're supposed to have. And to get out of that shamrock, living under that cloud and living in this grief because you
Yep.
don't have to. You don't have to
It's a
stay there.
choice. We get to choose. The world tries to make us think that this is all there is. That's another thing. So this is all there is, my friend, right? The world tries to make us think this is all there is. It's never going to be any better than this. Life sucks, right? No, it doesn't. We get to choose. When the world tries to make us think that we have to get down in the gutter with everybody else and blame and criticize and critique and yell at and argue and, raise a hand digit, no, we get to choose. We get to choose who we are. And I don't want to be that disgruntled person. I want to be this person. Happier, healthier, more hope filled. I want to be that person. That's how I believe we were created to be. And whatever life's circumstances have been for us, there's hope. There's hope. We can get that life back, right? And maybe it's not just with the grief recovery method. It's whatever you pick on the buffet. But please try this element. Please try this item, right? Maybe we can get you started to being back on that happier, healthier, hope-filled life that we were intended to live. What if we could? What if we could? What if we could all be happier, healthier, more hope-filled? Oh, what a world would that be?
What a
What
great
a
name for a
world.
podcast.
What
What
a
a great
great
name
name
for a
for a
podcast.
podcast. Wish I'd thought of it, but you did. You
Well,
did.
I love that because, life is glorious.
Yes, it
People,
is.
every time people ask me, "Hey, how are you?" I always say sensational. And people laugh. They're like, "I've never heard anyone answer that way." I'm like,
Yep.
it is. It's just every moment. This
Yeah.
universe is so incredible.
Incredible.
How do they put us together like this? How
Yeah.
do we
Oh,
have the ability to
and
do the things we
exactly.
do?
Exactly. And I tell people when somebody says, "How are you?" I like to say, "I'm blessed and blessed to know it." Because that's the second part, isn't it? Right? We can
That
all be
is the
blessed.
second
And you're
part.
you're like that too. You know that you're blessed. I'm blessed and blessed to know it. What a great extra benefit to being blessed, but to realize it and to appreciate it and then to share
Take
it.
a moment to just appreciate what we've been given.
Mm,
Instead of just being what we don't have, why don't I be a little grateful for what we
mm,
do
mm,
have, the
mm.
gifts that we have? But
Yeah.
anyways, you've been amazing. Now see everybody. Now do you see why I begged her to be my coach? This woman is amazing. Lois is going to help me become an amazing
Yeah.
grief recovery specialist coach so I can go out there and be her ripple and do my
Absolutely.
grief and growth coaching. And I'm so excited, but I couldn't have done it without you. You've given me the confidence, and you've given me that you've awakened that spark in me that's always been there of giving. It's always been there. Um, Yet fear is a scary thing, right? I mean,
Yep, yep.
and you have to overcome the fear, and sometimes it takes an amazing coach like Lois Hall to let us find that. So before we skedaddle, though, where can we find more about Lois Hall? Where can we get involved with you? Where can we find out
Yeah.
about your
Yeah.
coaching and everything that Lois is doing?
Yeah, cool. So there are two websites that I would give you. One is starfishassociatesllc.com. That's my Starfish Associates is my little LLC. Again, from the Starfish story. I'm actually wearing a Starfish shirt today. I don't know if you can see it. Starfishassociatesllc.com. And then if you want to learn more about the grief recovery method or the programs there, you can go to griefrecoverymethod.com, and in the About Us tab, you can look me up there, or you can scroll down to the About Us area at the bottom and put in Columbus, Ohio, and myself and other colleagues in this area will show up there. So that one is specific to the grief recovery method. And then Starfish Associates LLC, I do consulting, I do presentations, I do webinars. You want me to talk about grief and grief recovery and life can be more happy, hopeful, and hope filled? I'm on it. So, and I've got a couple colleagues who help me do that as well. So starfishassociatesllc.com or griefrecoverymethod.com, and then just look for me there in the About Us tab.
But you're on Facebook too, though, right?
I am on Facebook. Yeah, it's kind of my personal one, so I don't do a lot of business through Facebook. But I do, I talk about grief there
We
too.
could find you there just in case. See, I love you. You're the best. That's why I love her so much. How could you not love her? We just
Back at you. Back at you.
and we actually get work done, and during the hour
Do
coaching session, believe it or not, we actually get great work done. So
because I think you said in the
everybody
beginning, "I
again,
kick your butt," right? That's you said in the beginning. That's what
she's
I
tough.
hold you
She looks
accountable.
really nice, but
I hold you accountable. I love you,
everybody, once
Gary.
again,
Thank you.
you've been blessed with a little bit of time of Lois Hall. Please look her up. Love the starfish story. This has been great. We'll see you on an upcoming episode of the What If You Could podcast. Thank you, my friend. See you
Well,
soon.
thank you, Gary. Bye-bye.